Daniel Brooks carried a drunk stranger through his front door at 2 a.m. and didn't tell a single soul. No photos, no posts, no witnesses, just a man who made a quiet choice in the rain when no one was watching. He gave her his bedroom, took the couch, and left a glass of water on the nightstand. By morning, she was gone. He thought that was the end of it. It wasn't, because the woman he carried through that door was the only daughter of the most powerful man in Seattle, and she had already decided Daniel Brooks was different from every man she'd ever known. Drop a comment with your city. Let's see how far this story travels. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe. You're going to want to see where this goes. The rain came down the way it always does in Seattle in November. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just cold and relentless and personal. The kind of rain that gets inside your collar and stays there. Daniel Brooks was buttoning his jacket on the front steps of Harlow's, a mid-range restaurant on 4th Avenue, when his friend Marcus clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. "See? Was that so terrible?" Marcus said. "You ate food that didn't come from a microwave. You talked to human beings. You survived." "I survived," Daniel agreed. "Let's not push it." Marcus grinned. He'd been trying to drag Daniel out of the house for months. Not for anything wild, Marcus knew better than that. Just dinner. Just the basic act of being a person in the world again, instead of a ghost haunting a 3-bedroom house in the Beacon Hill neighborhood, existing purely in the space between Emma's bedtime and his own alarm clock. Daniel had agreed mostly to stop the texts, and he had to admit, if only to himself, walking down those wet steps, that it hadn't been terrible. He was reaching for his keys when he saw her. She was sitting on the concrete ledge at the bottom of the steps about 20 feet to his left, just past the edge of the restaurant's awning. No umbrella, no jacket that made any sense for November. Her hair was plastered to her face. She had her knees pulled up to her chest, and she was staring at something in the middle distance that wasn't there. His first thought was none of my business. His second thought came immediately after riding hard on the first one's heels, Emma. Not because she looked like Emma. Emma was 7 years old and missing her 2 front teeth. This woman was in her late 20s maybe. But there was something about the way she was sitting, that specific posture of someone who has given up on the idea of rescue, that hit Daniel in a place he hadn't expected to be hit tonight. He stopped walking. Marcus, who had been a step ahead, turned around. "What?" "That woman," Daniel said quietly. Marcus looked away. "She probably just needs a minute. She's been out here a while. She doesn't have a jacket." "Dan?" "Go ahead and get the car. I'll just check on her." Marcus made a face. Daniel knew well, the one that said, "You're going to do this no matter what I say. Aren't you?" and shrugged. "I'll circle the block. 2 minutes." Daniel walked over slowly, deliberately, the way you approach someone who might startle. "Hey," he said, stopping about 5 feet away. "You doing okay?" She turned her head. Her eyes took a moment to focus on him. They were dark brown, or maybe hazel, hard to tell in the wet yellow light of the street lamps, and they were not the eyes of someone doing okay. "I'm fine," she said, clearly and firmly, slurring only slightly on the word fine. "You sure it's pretty cold out here?" "I said I'm fine." She turned back to the middle distance. "I'm waiting for someone." Daniel glanced at her hands. No phone. "You have your phone with you?" "A beat. I lost it." "Inside?" "I don't know." He crouched down slowly so he wasn't looming over her. "What about a friend? Someone you can call from inside. They might let you use the restaurant's phone." She looked at him again. This time her expression shifted, still guarded, but something underneath the guard was cracking just slightly. "I don't want to go back inside," she said. "I threw up in their bathroom. It's embarrassing." "Okay," Daniel said simply. Not "it's fine" or "don't worry about it." Just okay. Acknowledged. Moving on. "I'm Daniel," he said. She studied him for a moment. Claire, do you know your address? I can call you a cab. I've got my phone." Something moved across her face. Frustration, maybe, or shame. "I know my address," she said. I I can't remember it right now. It's stupid. I just moved back and I've only been there a week and I can't. She stopped, pressed her fingers to her forehead. I can't remember it. That's not stupid. That happens. It happens to people who drink too much at their ex-fiancé's engagement party, she said flatly, which is a different category of stupid. Daniel absorbed that. He didn't say he was sorry. Didn't say, oh, that's terrible. Just let it sit for a second. So you don't have a phone, you don't have a jacket, and you can't remember your address, he said finally. Correct. Is there anybody in Seattle I can reach out to for you? Family? A friend? She laughed, a short, harsh sound without much humor in it. My dad is the last person I'd call right now, and my friends are all I've been overseas. I don't really have people here yet. Marcus pulled up to the curb. Daniel stood, looked at the car, looked back at Claire. He made the decision in about 4 seconds. Okay, he said. Here's what I'm going to offer, and you can say no. I'm going to get you into that car, take you somewhere warm and safe, and in the morning when you're clearer, we'll figure out how to get you home. No questions asked, no obligations. She looked at him like he'd just offered her something in a foreign language. You don't know me. No, but you're sitting in the rain without a jacket, and you just told me you don't have anyone to call, so. He held out his hand. Just the hand. No pressure. Offers on the table. The silence between them lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then Claire took his hand. Marcus didn't say much on the drive. Daniel had explained quietly, she lost her phone. She's not in a state to be left alone. I'll take care of it. And Marcus, who had known Daniel for 11 years and understood that certain tones of voice were not negotiable, had simply nodded. Claire sat in the back seat with her arms wrapped around herself, her wet hair dripping onto the upholstery, staring out the window. She wasn't crying. She had the look of someone who had decided firmly that she was not going to cry in front of strangers. Daniel respected that. He didn't ask her questions. He didn't fill the silence with reassurances. He just drove. Well, Marcus drove and let her be in whatever place she needed to be. When they pulled up to Daniel's house on Beacon Hill, Marcus turned around and gave him a look that said about 15 things at once. Daniel gave him a single nod back that answered all of them. I'll call you tomorrow, Daniel said. Yeah, you will, Marcus said. The house was exactly what it was, a modest 2-story in a working neighborhood, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors' names and left their kids' bikes on the porch. Daniel had bought it with Lauren 8 years ago. He hadn't changed much since she died. He'd thought about it. People kept suggesting he redecorate, start fresh, all that. But every time he stood in the middle of the living room and looked around, he couldn't quite identify what he'd change or why. It was home. It looked like home. That was enough. He unlocked the front door and stepped aside for Claire. She hesitated on the porch. Your family is here. My daughter, he said. She's 7. She's asleep. I don't want to wake her up. You won't. She sleeps through thunderstorms. He gestured. Come on in. Claire walked into the living room slowly with the particular carefulness of someone who's been drinking but is trying not to show how much. She looked at the couch, the coffee table, a stack of Emma's drawings on the side table that Daniel kept meaning to put away. The bathroom is down the hall on the left, Daniel said. Take your time. There are towels in the cabinet under the sink, clean ones. I'll get you something to change into. He found a pair of sweatpants and an old Northwestern sweatshirt, things he didn't wear but hadn't gotten rid of, knocked on the bathroom door and left them on the handle without opening it. Then he went to the kitchen, put a glass of water and 2 Tylenol on the nightstand in the spare room, his room, the room he slept in, and moved his own things to the couch with the same efficiency he brought to everything. No drama, no announcements. He was lying on the couch reading when Claire came out of the bathroom, dressed, hair damp but untangled, looking significantly more like a person and less like someone the night had beaten. She stopped in the hallway. You gave me your room. Spare room, he said. It wasn't exactly true, but the distinction felt kind. She looked at him for a moment. You don't have to sleep on the couch. I sleep on the couch fine. It's actually... He paused. My daughter falls asleep there watching movies about half the time. I've spent a lot of nights pulling her to bed and then just giving up and lying down myself. It's comfortable. A beat. Why are you being this nice to me? Claire asked. The question wasn't aggressive. It was genuine. And behind it, Daniel heard something he recognized, the specific tone of someone who had learned to be suspicious of kindness, because kindness had always wanted something. He thought about it for a real second before answering. You needed help, he said. That's the whole reason. She studied him like she was looking for the catch. Daniel met her eyes and waited. Okay, she said finally, quietly. There's water on the nightstand, Tylenol too. If you need anything else, I'll be right here. She nodded, turned toward the room, stopped with her hand on the doorframe. Daniel, she said. Yeah. Thank you. He nodded once, the way his father had always nodded at something that didn't need more words. Get some sleep. He heard the bedroom door close. He lay in the dark for a while, looking at the ceiling, listening to the rain. His phone said 2:47 a.m. He thought about Emma asleep upstairs, completely unaware that a stranger was in the spare room. He'd need to explain that in the morning, gently, in a way that didn't frighten her or confuse her. Dad helped someone who needed help. Emma would accept that. She'd accepted harder things. He thought about Lauren, the way he always thought about Lauren, in the quiet. Not with grief anymore. Not exactly. But with a kind of constant, low-frequency awareness of absence, the way you're always aware of a missing tooth with your tongue. He thought about what Claire had said. My ex-fiancé's engagement party. He didn't know what that felt like. He'd never been left. He'd been the one left behind in a different way, not by a choice, but by the worst possible accident of time. But he understood in some foundational way the feeling of sitting alone in the rain, because the place you were supposed to be didn't belong to you anymore. He fell asleep with the light still on in the kitchen, the way he always did when Emma was downstairs, so she'd never wake up in the dark alone. Bull. At 6:15 a.m., Emma came down the stairs. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom, staring at her father on the couch with the particular expression of a 7-year-old cataloging a thing that does not fit. Dad, she whispered. Morning bug. Why are you on the couch? He sat up, ran a hand through his hair. This was the conversation he needed to handle correctly. Someone needed a place to stay last night. She's in the spare room. Emma's eyes went wide. Not scared, curious. Profoundly, immediately curious. A girl. A woman. She's grown up. Who is she? She's someone who needed help last night. Her name is Claire. Emma processed this with the seriousness of a PhD candidate. Is she nice? I think she is. Is she going to be here for breakfast? I don't know yet. She might still be sleeping. Emma looked toward the hallway. Can I make her a card? Daniel looked at his daughter, 7 years old. No front teeth, already reaching for her box of construction paper in her mind, and felt something in his chest do the thing it always did. The thing he had no name for. Yeah, he said. If you want. I'm going to make her a card, Emma announced with total conviction, and turned around to go get her markers. Claire woke at 9. She came out of the spare room, slowly stopping in the hallway at the sight of the kitchen. Daniel at the stove, something in the pan coffee already made, and Emma at the kitchen table surrounded by markers working on something with the focused intensity of a surgeon. Emma looked up first. Hi, she said. You're Claire. Claire blinked. I am. I made you this. Emma held up a piece of orange construction paper. In large, careful letters it said, Good morning. Claire. There was a drawing of what might have been a house, or possibly a very large hat. It was difficult to say. Claire took it slowly. She looked at the card for a moment. This is for me, she said. Dad said you needed help, Emma said simply. So I made you a card because cards make people feel better. Do you want orange juice? We have the kind with pulp and the kind without pulp. Claire's mouth moved. She got it under control. "The kind without pulp," she said. "Please." Emma slid off her chair immediately to get it. Daniel turned from the stove. "Morning. How's your head?" "Like something bad happened inside it," Claire said honestly. "Sit down. Eggs." She looked at him, and he saw it again, the thing he'd seen last night in the rain. The particular searching quality in her eyes, looking for the catch. "You don't have to feed me," she said. "I'm cooking anyway. Sit." She sat. Emma brought her the orange juice with both hands, carefully the way she'd been taught, and set it down in front of Claire. Then she climbed back into her own chair and picked up her orange marker. "I'm drawing your house," Emma said. "Even though I don't know what it looks like, so I made it big." "That's a good idea," Claire said. She wrapped both hands around the glass of orange juice and looked at this kitchen, the sticky note grocery list on the refrigerator. The drawings held up by alphabet magnets. The coffee mug that said, "World's okayest dad," and something moved across her face that she couldn't quite hide in time. Daniel pretended not to see it. He slid a plate of eggs in front of her. "Eat something," he said. "Then we'll figure out how to get you home." She ate. She figured out her address over coffee. It came back to her the way lost things sometimes do, not suddenly but gradually, piece by piece, the street name first, and then the building number, and then the apartment. Daniel found a phone number for a car service in her contacts through her laptop, which she'd left at the restaurant, and which the staff, once Daniel called, had held safely behind the bar. She stood at the front door with her phone retrieved by a remarkably cooperative restaurant manager who'd felt guilty about the whole situation, dressed again in her own clothes from the night before, holding Emma's orange card. Emma had added to it while they were sorting out logistics. It now also said in smaller letters, "Come back sometime." Claire looked at Daniel in the doorway. "I don't usually," she started. Stopped. Tried again. "I don't usually end up in situations like this." "I know," he said. "I don't know how to." She looked down at the card. "Thank you isn't enough." "It's plenty." She looked up at him, fully, the way she hadn't quite been able to the night before. "You didn't have to do any of this," she said. "I know." "Why did you—" He'd already answered this question once, but she was asking it again in a different way. Not "what do you want from me," but something more like, "how does a person like you exist?" Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "I have a daughter," he said. "I think about her growing up. Someday she'll be out in the world, and something might go wrong and I won't be there. And the only thing I can hope is that somebody, some stranger who doesn't know her, who has no reason to stop, does what I did last night." He shrugged. "So I do it. For whoever needs it." Claire stood very still. The car pulled up to the curb. "I'll go," she said. "Okay." She stepped off the porch, stopped at the bottom of the steps, and turned around. "My last name is Whitmore," she said. He didn't react. The name meant something. It was a name he'd heard, but the connection wasn't there yet, not fully. "Okay," he said. She got in the car. He watched it drive away. Behind him, Emma appeared in the doorway in her socks. "Is she gone?" "Yeah." "Do you think she'll come back?" Daniel watched the car turn the corner at the end of the street. "I don't know, Bug." He didn't know. He really didn't know. He went to work on Monday and heard, like everyone else, that Robert Whitmore's daughter had returned from 2 years abroad and would be joining the company in a senior advisory capacity. He sat in the Monday morning briefing and thought about all the Roberts he'd ever known. Robert Whitmore, his boss, the Robert Whitmore, the man whose name was on the building, the man who'd built Westbridge Construction from 40 employees to 400, had a daughter who had been overseas, who had just come back. Daniel was still turning that over in his mind, not yet connecting the pieces, when the conference room door opened, and everything stopped. She walked in beside one of the senior executives, and she was not the same woman from his porch steps. The wet hair was polished and swept back. The borrowed Northwestern sweatshirt was a tailored blazer. She was carrying a leather portfolio and speaking quietly to the executive beside her with the complete comfort of someone who had been in important rooms her entire life. But she looked up when she entered, and she looked directly at Daniel. And for one full second before her expression rearranged itself into something professional and composed, he saw it. Recognition. She knew exactly who he was. He knew exactly who she was. Whitmore. Claire Whitmore. Robert Whitmore's only daughter. The woman he had carried through his front door at 2 a.m. was the daughter of the man who signed Daniel's paychecks, owned the company Daniel had spent 5 years building a reputation inside, and had the power to end everything Daniel had rebuilt with a single phone call. She knew. She had known when she gave him her name on his front porch. She had known, and she had told him anyway. Daniel sat very still in his chair while the room buzzed around him. He thought about Emma's orange card. Come back sometime. He thought about the way Claire had stood at the bottom of his porch steps and looked at him like he was something she didn't have a word for. He thought about the fact that he'd made her eggs. He thought about his job, his reputation, his daughter. The mortgage on a house that still had Lauren's handwriting on a birthday card tucked in the kitchen junk drawer that he hadn't been able to throw away. He thought about all the ways this could end badly. He thought about what he'd told her on the porch. I do it, for whoever needs it. He had made his choice. He just hadn't known, not fully, not yet, what it was going to cost him. The cost was just beginning. She said nothing. That was the first thing Daniel noticed. Not just in that conference room moment when their eyes met, but in the days that followed. Claire Whitmore walked into Westbridge Construction like she belonged there, which she did, and she moved through the offices and the meetings and the hallways with the particular kind of ease that comes from growing up watching someone powerful operate. She knew how rooms worked. She knew where to stand, when to speak, when to let silence do the work for her. And she said absolutely nothing about Daniel Brooks, not to the executives, not to the project managers, not to her father. Daniel spent the first 3 days waiting for the conversation that never came. He'd be in the middle of reviewing a structural report, and his phone would sit there on the desk like a small bomb, and every time it buzzed, he'd feel his stomach drop 2 inches before he checked and found it was Marcus asking about the game, or Emma's school sending a permission slip reminder, or a contractor calling about a delivery window. Never Robert Whitmore. Never HR. Never anything that suggested the world was about to fall on him. By Thursday, he started to breathe again. By Friday, he almost convinced himself it was going to be fine. Then Claire walked into his office and closed the door behind her. He was on his feet before he'd consciously decided to stand. Old reflex. His mother had raised him to stand when someone entered a room, and apparently that training was deeper than his nervous system. She was in a gray blazer carrying a tablet, and she looked exactly like what she was, a senior executive's daughter who had been handed a serious role and was fully capable of doing it. Nothing about her said, I wore your Northwestern sweatshirt and threw up at a restaurant bathroom last Saturday night. Nothing about her said anything except controlled professional competence. Mr. Brooks, she said. Ms. Whitmore? A beat. She looked at him. He looked at her. The silence had weight. I wanted to introduce myself properly, she said. I'll be working with the advisory team on the Harbor District project. That puts me in contact with your division. I heard, he said carefully. I also wanted to say... She stopped. Reset. I should have said it sooner. I'm sorry for the situation last weekend. That was not something you should have had to deal with. He sat back down slowly. You don't need to apologize for that. I'm apologizing anyway. She held his gaze. And I need you to know that what happened, the circumstances, I haven't discussed them with anyone. I won't. He studied her. Why are you telling me that? Because you need to know, she said simply. You helped me. The least I can do is not make it complicated for you. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Outside his office, he could hear the ordinary sounds of the building phone's printers, someone's laugh down the hall. Normal Tuesday sounds, the world carrying on. Thank you, he said. I appreciate that. She nodded. clicked her tablet on, then off again like she was deciding something. The Harbor District reports. I reviewed the last 2 quarters. Your team's numbers are clean. We try. The Kellerman Phase 3 delay whose call was that. The shift was so clean, so practiced, that it took him a half-second to follow it. They were talking shop now. She had moved them out of the awkward territory and into neutral ground without announcing she was doing it, and he recognized the move for what it was, not evasion, but grace. Mine, he said. Soil reports came back inconsistent. I pushed the pour date rather than risk the foundation. Even though it cost 6 days on the timeline. Even though. She looked at him. Robert signed off on that. He pushed back. I held my position. He signed off. Something changed in her expression, small, almost imperceptible, like a number that didn't add up suddenly clicking into place. Okay, she said. I'll see you in the Wednesday review. She left. Daniel sat at his desk for a long moment after she was gone, and then he pulled up the Harbor District folder and went back to work because that was what you did. You kept working. That was the whole strategy. He just wasn't entirely sure anymore what he was working toward. That was the beginning of it. The real beginning. Not the rain, not the conference room moment. The Tuesday afternoon when Claire Whitmore walked into his office, apologized for nothing. She'd actually done wrong, and then asked him a sharp question about foundation pour decisions. And he'd told her the truth directly, the same way he talked to anyone. He didn't know it yet, but that was the moment she stopped looking at him like someone she needed to manage and started looking at him like someone she wanted to understand. She came back Wednesday for the review meeting, which was entirely appropriate since she was on the advisory team. She sat at the far end of the conference table and didn't look at Daniel more than she looked at anyone else. She asked precise questions. She pushed back on 2 cost projections with numbers that were clearly her own research, not inherited opinion. When someone tried to deflect with vague language about market conditions, she cut through it without raising her voice. She was, Daniel had to admit, formidably good at her job. After the meeting broke, one of the other project managers, a guy named Phil, who had been at Westbridge 11 years, caught up with Daniel in the hall. "What do you think?" Phil said, tilting his head back toward the conference room. "About what? Whitmore's kid. She's sharp, or is she playing at it?" "She's sharp," Daniel said. "Yeah." Phil lowered his voice. "Heard she was in London, some kind of development consulting firm. Did their whole European expansion strategy." "I didn't know that." 2 years, 28 cities. Then she just comes home." Phil shrugged. "Rumor is the old man called her back. Wants to hand her the company eventually." Daniel said nothing to that. "Must be nice," Phil said and walked off. Daniel went back to his office and stared at the Harbor District files for a while without really seeing them. He thought about Claire sitting in his kitchen with both hands around a glass of orange juice, looking at Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, like she'd never seen a refrigerator that looked like that before. He thought about the way she'd taken the orange construction paper card in both hands and looked at it for just a beat too long. He thought about what it must look like from the outside, a woman who had spent 2 years managing European development strategy coming home to a job her father created for her, and how completely that description failed to account for the person who had been sitting on those wet steps. The gap between who people appeared to be and who they actually were was something Daniel had always thought about more than most people. Lauren had been that way, serious and a little intimidating to people who didn't know her until she laughed, and then everything recalibrated. Emma was the opposite. She gave you the whole thing immediately, all of it, here I am, and people sometimes didn't know what to do with that much directness in a 7-year-old. He wondered not for the first time that week what the story was with the ex-fiancée's engagement party. He told himself to stop wondering about it. He didn't stop. It was a Thursday afternoon 3 weeks later when she found him in the project archive room on the 2nd floor. Not a chance encounter. Daniel had been around offices long enough to recognize the difference between someone who happened to be somewhere and someone who'd looked up where you'd be. She had a folder. She set it on the table next to his. "Can I ask you something off the record?" she said. "Depends on what it is." Fair answer. She opened the folder. The Meridian Square project from 4 years ago. The city contract that Westbridge passed on. Do you know why? He looked at her. I wasn't at the director level 4 years ago. I know. But you were on the initial assessment team. I found your name on the site evaluation. He was quiet for a moment, deciding something. The site had environmental liability exposure, he said. The soil contamination from the previous commercial use hadn't been fully remediated. The city wanted to accelerate past the required testing window. I flagged it. And the company walked away. Correct. Because of your flag. My flag and 2 others. But yes. She looked at him steadily. That contract was worth $32 million. I know what it was worth. You recommended walking away from $32 million. I recommended not building on contaminated ground, he said, which is a different thing. She studied him like she was measuring something. What happened to the site? Different developer took it. They cut the same corners the city wanted us to cut. 3 years and the subsidence report started. They're in litigation now and the project's essentially frozen. He paused. Nobody got hurt. That's the only good part. Claire sat down across from him. She hadn't asked permission. She just sat like the decision had been made somewhere before she was aware of making it. My father almost took that contract, she said. He told me about it years ago. He said someone on the assessment team pushed back hard, and it cost them a major deal, and he was furious at the time. Daniel said nothing. He said later, after the litigation news came out, that unnamed person on the assessment team had saved the company from one of the worst decisions they could have made. She paused. He never found out who it was. The room was very quiet. Huh, Daniel said. Claire looked at him. He respects that kind of judgment more than almost anything. He doesn't talk about it often. But I've watched him my whole life, and the thing that gets through to him really through is someone who holds a line when it costs them something. I wasn't thinking about impressing anyone, Daniel said. I was thinking about what happened if we were wrong. I know, she said. That's the point. She closed her folder, stood up. But she didn't leave immediately. She stood there for a moment, and Daniel waited because he'd learned that Claire Whitmore usually had something more to say when she stood still like that. My ex-fiancé, she said. Nathan Pierce. Do you know that name? He thought for a second. Pierce Capital, institutional investment, connected to 3 or 4 Westbridge subcontractors through his family's holding company. She nodded. We were engaged for 2 years. His family and my father had been planning it since we were in college, basically. It was never. She stopped. Started again. He treated everything like a portfolio, including me. Daniel didn't say anything. When I found out he'd gotten engaged to someone else 2 months after I went to London, I told myself I didn't care. I'd been the one who left after all. I walked away from the engagement first. I had no right to care. She exhaled. But then his people sent me an invitation. To the party. And I went because I am apparently stupider about some things than I am about others. That's not stupid, Daniel said. It was a little stupid. Maybe a little, he allowed. She looked at him sharply. Then something broke in her face briefly, just for a second, and she laughed. It was an entirely different sound from the short, harsh laugh on the restaurant steps. This one was real. You're supposed to say it wasn't stupid at all, she said. Would that have helped? No, she admitted. Then there you go. She picked up her folder. At the door, she stopped. Mr. Brooks. Daniel. A pause, like she was deciding whether to use it. Daniel, she said. Thank you. For the eggs, too. Emma makes very good orange juice. She left. He sat in the archive room for a while after she was gone. He thought about Nathan Pierce. He thought about a woman who had walked away from a 2-year engagement and then gotten on a plane to London and spent 2 years doing the work that needed doing and not talking about any of it. He thought about Emma at the kitchen table with her markers making a card for a stranger because someone needed help, and that was reason enough. He thought about what it felt like to be in a room where someone was honest with you, without requiring you to perform anything back. Then he closed his folders and went back to work. Because that was what you did. He just kept choosing to keep doing it, even when the calculus got more complicated. The fourth week was when Marcus cornered him. It happened over lunch sandwiches from the place 2 blocks from Daniel's office, which was technically a neutral location, and therefore, by Marcus's reasoning, fair ground for ambush. "Okay," Marcus said, unwrapping his turkey on wheat with the energy of someone who has been waiting to say something for 3 weeks and has run out of patience. "Tell me what's happening." "Nothing's happening." "Daniel." "I'm eating a sandwich." "The woman from the car." Marcus pointed at him. "I looked her up. Claire Whitmore, Robert Whitmore's daughter. You work for Robert Whitmore." "I'm aware of that." "So you carried your boss's daughter through your front door at 2 in the morning, and then you made her eggs." "How do you know about the eggs?" "Emma told me. She called me last Sunday to ask if I thought Claire was going to come back. She had made a follow-up card." Marcus's expression was somewhere between concerned and impressed. "Daniel, talk to me. What is this?" Daniel set down his sandwich. He looked at the table for a moment, thinking about how to say it accurately. "I don't know," he said. It's not. I genuinely don't know. She's my boss's daughter. She's in a professional capacity at the company. We've had some conversations that were clear, direct. She's a direct person." "You like her?" "I said she's direct. Which is the single thing you find most attractive in a person, so. You like her." Marcus leaned back. "Does she like you?" Daniel said nothing. "Oh," Marcus said. "Okay. It's complicated. It's always complicated with you. You turned, 'My wife is gone, I have a daughter, I have a mortgage, and I rebuild houses for a living' into something manageable and functional. You can handle complicated. That's different." "It's not that different." Marcus picked up his sandwich. "What's the actual problem, the professional situation?" "That's part of it." "What's the other part?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a city bus went past, shaking the glass slightly. "I built something," he said finally. "After Lauren. It took a long time. Emma's good. We're stable. The job is solid. I didn't think I was going to be interested in adding anything to that picture. And now," he looked out the window, "and now I'm thinking about things I haven't thought about in 5 years, he said. "And I'm not sure whether I'm reading something correctly or I'm just..." He stopped. "I don't want to be wrong about this. I can't be wrong about this." Marcus was quiet for a moment, in the particular way he was quiet when he was going to say something that mattered. "You're not wrong," he said. "I watched her face when you walked over to her on those steps. I was in the car. I could see her from the window. She watched you come toward her, and something in her face changed. That was before you said a word." Daniel looked at him. "I'm just saying," Marcus said. "Some things don't need a lot of analysis." Daniel picked up his sandwich. "She's Robert Whitmore's daughter." "Yeah." "If this goes wrong in any direction..." "Yeah, I have Emma to think about." "I know." "So," Marcus nodded slowly. "So you're going to be careful and slow and do it the right way like you do everything." He took a bite. "That's fine. Just don't talk yourself out of it because you're scared. There's a difference between being careful and being scared." Daniel thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. The 5th week, Claire started doing something that he noticed and couldn't unnotice. She started finding reasons to be where the actual work was happening, not in the executive conferences, not in the advisory meetings, down in the project management division, in the document rooms, and the planning sessions in the places where the people who actually put up buildings spent their days. She didn't announce herself. She didn't grandstand. She just showed up, asked questions, listened to the answers. When Carla, who had been running the permitting desk for 9 years, had a confrontation with a city inspector that nearly derailed the Harbor District timeline, it was Claire who went to bat. Quietly, efficiently, without creating a story about herself in the process. Phil cornered Daniel in the coffee area about it. "Did you see what she did with the Hendricks permit thing? I heard about it. She knew the building code interpretation by memory. Chapter and section number. Cited it directly to the inspector's face." Phil shook his head. "Where does she learn that?" "She studied it," Daniel said. "Why would she bother? She's the boss's daughter. She doesn't need to know." "She bothered," Daniel said, "because she wants to know what she's talking about." He refilled his coffee. "Some people are like that." Phil gave him a long look that Daniel didn't engage with and walked away. What Daniel didn't tell Phil was that he knew why she was doing it. He knew because she'd told him in pieces across 4 conversations in hallways and archive rooms, and once in the parking structure when they'd both ended up walking to their cars at the same time. She'd told him about London, not the professional version, but the real one. 2 years in 18 cities, sleeping in furnished apartments, eating alone most nights, doing work that mattered, but being completely unknown. No one called her Robert Whitmore's daughter in London. She was just the consultant who knew her numbers and worked late and didn't complain when the job got hard. "That was the first time I understood what I was actually capable of," she'd said. They were at the parking structure. Her car was a level up from his. Neither of them was moving toward their respective cars. "Not what my father's name was capable of. What I was." "And then you came back," he said. "And then I came back." She looked at her keys. "He called and said he needed me, and I believed him, and now I'm here." A beat. "He did need me. That's real. The company's at a transition point, and he genuinely wants someone he trusts in an advisory capacity. I'm not wrong about that. But I also know he's been planning my whole life for 40 years, and this is another chapter of that plan." She exhaled. "And I can't tell anymore where his plan ends and my choices begin. Does that make sense?" "It makes complete sense," Daniel said. She looked at him. "How do you do it, the clarity? You always seem to know what you think." "I don't always." "You seem like you do." He thought about it. "When Lauren died," he said, "I had about 3 months where I couldn't tell what I thought about anything. Everything went sideways. Emma needed me, and I was there for her, but inside..." He paused. "There was a morning when I drove Emma to school, walked back in the house, and stood in the kitchen for 45 minutes because I couldn't decide whether to make coffee. Not because I was sad, because I literally could not access the part of myself that makes decisions. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I thought. I was just static." Claire was very still listening. "I started making small decisions on purpose," he said. "Really small. Coffee, shower, walk Emma to the bus stop. One thing then the next thing. And after a while the decisions got bigger. And then one day I realized I'd been making them without thinking about it, and the static was gone." He looked at his keys too. "I don't have a system for clarity. I decided to keep deciding, and I've been doing that since." The parking structure was quiet around them. "Emma's lucky," Claire said. "I'm luckier," he said. She looked at him. He looked back. It was exactly the kind of moment that could become something, and they both knew it, and they both let it be what it was, for a few more seconds before Claire said, "Good night, Daniel," and walked up the ramp to her car. He stood there for a moment. Then he drove home, picked Emma up from the neighbor, who watched her after school, helped her with a worksheet about rainforests, ate dinner, and lay on his couch in the dark, thinking about the particular way Claire Whitmore said his name. "Good night, Daniel." Like she'd been practicing it for a while. It was a Wednesday, week 6, when Nathan Pierce walked into Westbridge Construction. Daniel didn't know who he was at first. He saw a man in an expensive suit talking to the receptionist with the kind of confidence that comes from never being turned away from places. And he noted it, the way he noted anything in his peripheral environment, categorized and filed, and kept walking. He found out at lunch from Phil, who had apparently been at the front desk when it happened. "Pierce Capital," Phil said. "Apparently they're looking at a consulting position on the Harbor District financing. The old man invited him in." Daniel's fork stopped midway to his plate. He put it down carefully. "Nathan Pierce," he said. "You know him." "I know the name." He kept his voice even. "Robert Whitmore invited him. Had a 2-hour meeting with him this morning. Pierce's family has connections to 3 of the financing institutions on the harbor project. Makes sense they'd want him at the table." Phil shrugged. "I heard he knows the family. Old money, old connections, all that." Daniel said nothing. He spent the afternoon with a low-level alertness running under everything he did. The kind that doesn't interfere with work, but doesn't go away either. He finished 3 reports. He called the city permitting office twice. He reviewed the soil compaction data from the Harbor District site inspection and made 2 notes for the Wednesday review. At 4:15, he was walking past the executive wing when he heard voices through a partially open door. He wasn't trying to listen, but he heard Claire's voice sharp and controlled, which was different from her usual tone, and he stopped before he could decide not to. "You don't need to be here, Nathan. Your father invited me. That's not really something I can control. You could have declined." "Why would I decline?" A pause, and the voice that said it was smooth and even and completely comfortable. The voice of someone who had never once second-guessed whether he belonged in a room. "It's a major project. Good financials. My family has history with Westbridge. It's a natural fit. It's a transparent move." "Claire, don't." The one word landed clean and final. "We're professionals here. I'll treat you like a professional, but don't mistake professional courtesy for anything else." A longer pause. "You always did take things too personally," Nathan said. The silence that followed was the kind that has a shape. "You showed me your engagement announcement at your own party," Claire said very quietly. "While I was still standing there, you waited until I was in the room and then you announced it, and then you looked at me." The quiet was precise as a scalpel. "Don't tell me I take things too personally, Nathan. Not to my face." Daniel didn't move. He heard footsteps, Claire's. He'd know them anywhere now. Crossing the office toward the door, and he took 3 fast, quiet steps back around the corner before the door opened fully. He kept walking, made it to the stairwell, pushed through the door, and stood there for a moment in the stairwell quiet. He thought about Claire's face in the parking structure. The thing she'd said about not being able to tell where her father's plan ended and her choices began. He thought about a man smooth enough to get invited back into a professional space he'd burned, who had chosen to accept the invitation, and who had just told a woman he'd publicly humiliated that she took things too personally. He thought about Emma at home, right now, being watched by Mrs. Parrish next door, probably drawing something, probably telling Mrs. Parrish a detailed story about her day at school, with the kind of narrative commitment most adults reserve for important occasions. He thought about what it cost to hold a line. He thought about contaminated ground and $32 million contracts and what happened when you built on something that wasn't safe. Then he went back to his desk and worked until 6 o'clock. And he drove home. And he made Emma dinner. And he helped her with a math worksheet. And he told her a story about a knight who was also a general contractor and whose specialty was earthquake-resistant foundations. Emma thought this was the funniest premise for a story she had ever heard and requested 7 specific plot details before she fell asleep. Daniel sat in the chair beside her bed in the dark for a few minutes after her breathing changed. He thought about Claire saying, "You always seem to know what you think." He thought about what he actually thought, about all of it. He stayed there in the dark until he was sure. Then he went downstairs, poured himself a glass of water, and looked at the spot on the nightstand in the spare room, where he'd left the Tylenol and the glass of water 6 weeks ago. He was still thinking when his phone buzzed. Unknown number, but a Seattle area code. He picked it up. "Daniel?" Claire's voice. Quiet. Careful. "I'm sorry to call. I got your number from It Doesn't Matter. I'm sorry it's late." "It's not late," he said. It was 8:15. Emma was asleep. "Are you okay?" A pause. "Nathan Pierce is going to be on the Harbor District financing team. I heard." Another pause longer. "I need you to know something. Before this gets more complicated, Before she stopped, tried again. He's going to look around at whatever is happening, and he's going to make it into something. That's what he does. He reads what matters to people, and he turns it into leverage. And I need you to know that if that happens, if he comes after Claire. She stopped. I've held lines before, he said. I know how. The silence this time was different, softer at the edges. I know you do, she said. I didn't want you to be blindsided. I appreciate that. I should go. Yeah. Neither of them moved, which in a phone call means the line stayed open and nobody spoke. Emma okay, Claire said finally. He looked toward the ceiling, toward the upstairs where Emma was sleeping with her stuffed elephant and 3 library books and a flashlight she was definitely using after bedtime. She's perfect, he said. Good. A breath. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Claire. The line went quiet. He stood in his kitchen for a long time. Somewhere above him, Emma was probably still reading. Somewhere across the city, Claire Whitmore was probably standing somewhere quiet, holding her phone, thinking about leverage and choices and lines. And Nathan Pierce was somewhere in Seattle tonight, in a hotel, or at a dinner table, looking at the board and moving pieces. Daniel knew what happened when someone tried to build on ground that hadn't been tested. He'd spent his whole career making sure it didn't happen on his watch. He wasn't going to let it happen now. Not to his job, not to what he'd built, not to Emma. And not, he was sure of this now, in the way he was sure of load-bearing calculations and soil compaction reports, in the way he was sure of things that mattered not to Claire. He went to the kitchen counter and wrote himself a note the way he always did before a complicated project. Short, direct, just the essential thing. He wrote, "Hold the line." He folded it in half and left it where he'd see it in the morning. Then he turned off the kitchen light and went to bed, and he slept the way he always slept, before a difficult week, completely efficiently without waste. He was going to need it. The note was still on the kitchen counter Monday morning when Daniel came downstairs. Hold the line. He'd written it Friday night like a reminder, and now it looked like a warning. He folded it, put it in his shirt pocket, and made Emma's lunch. She was upstairs getting dressed, narrating something to herself, the way she always did in the morning, a running commentary on whatever was happening in her head, half story and half argument with imaginary characters. He could hear it through the ceiling, rising and falling, punctuated by the sound of dresser drawers. He stood at the counter and listened to it the way he listened to things he knew could disappear. Like rain, like certain kinds of quiet. Emma came down at 7:14 with her backpack on the wrong shoulder, one shoe untied, and a very serious expression. "Dad," she said, "if a knight's specialty is earthquake-resistant foundations, what does his shield look like? Probably has rebar on it." She considered this with genuine gravity. "I think it has a crack in it," she said, "but it doesn't fall apart." He looked at her. "That's better," he said. "I know." She sat down for breakfast. "I'm going to draw it tonight." He tied her shoe. He drove her to school. He watched her go in through the double doors with her backpack bouncing and her coat half off already, and then he sat in the parking lot for a moment before pulling back out onto the street. A shield with a crack in it that doesn't fall apart. 7 years old and sharper than most rooms full of adults. He got to the office at 8:45. By 9, he already knew the week had started badly. The first sign was Phil, at the coffee station, who looked up when Daniel walked in and immediately looked back down. Phil was not a man who looked away from things. He'd been in construction project management for over a decade, and he'd built the specific kind of face that didn't flinch at difficult conversations or bad news. So when he looked down at his coffee like it required his complete attention, Daniel felt the first low pulse of something wrong. "Morning," Daniel said. "Morning." Phil still didn't look up. "What happened?" A pause. "Heard some things over the weekend." "What kind of things?" Phil set his coffee down, looked at Daniel with the expression of someone who wishes they were somewhere else having a different conversation. Nathan Pierce had dinner with some of the senior partners Friday night, Keller Bright and Morrison, the three who have been here longest. Daniel waited. He told them a story, Phil said. About you. The air in the room felt different. Not dramatic, just different the way temperature changes in a building when a window opens somewhere. What story? Daniel said. His voice was even. He said, Phil exhaled. He said that you had a personal relationship with Claire Whitmore that predated her joining the company, that she came to your house, that there was a... He stopped. He used the word situation, said it was the kind of thing the company should probably know about before it became a liability. Daniel said nothing. He has security footage, Phil said. Or he says he does. From a camera down the block from your house. Her getting out of a car. You at the door. Phil's voice was flat and careful. Dan, I need to ask you directly. Is there something going on between you and Claire Whitmore? The coffee machine finished its cycle. Someone opened the door to the hallway and let it swing shut behind them. I helped someone who needed help, Daniel said. That's the complete story. Phil looked at him for a long moment. Okay, he said. I believe you. But Pierce is not going to tell it that way. I know. This is going to Robert Whitmore. I know that too. Phil picked up his coffee. What are you going to do? Daniel thought about contaminated ground, about building on something that wasn't tested, about $32 million contracts and what it cost to hold a position when every pressure in the room was pushing you to let go. My job, he said. Same thing I always do. He went to his desk. He spent the morning on the Harbor District Foundation reports. He called the city inspector's office about the Kellerman Phase 3 sign-off. He reviewed a subcontractor invoice that had 2 line items that didn't add up and sent a note to accounting. He answered 11 emails with the precision of someone who was paying close attention to every word they put in writing. He did not hear from HR. He did not hear from Robert Whitmore. He did not see Claire. At 11:30 his phone rang. Internal line. Extension he didn't recognize. Daniel Brooks, he answered. Mr. Brooks. The voice was male measured and unfamiliar. This is Gerald Keller, senior partner. I was wondering if you had a few minutes this afternoon. The name landed with weight. Gerald Keller had been at Westbridge for 22 years. He was in practical terms the institutional memory of the company the man Robert Whitmore consulted when he wanted perspective that went beyond the spreadsheet. Of course, Daniel said. When works for you? 2 o'clock. My office. I'll be there. He hung up. He stared at the Harbor District folder on his desk for a moment, then opened it and kept working. There was nothing else to do. You couldn't outrun a wave. You positioned yourself correctly and you let it break. At 12:15, Claire appeared in the doorway of his office. She looked like she'd slept about 3 hours. Her blazer was perfect. Her face was controlled. But Daniel had learned to read what was underneath the control, and underneath it was something that was working very hard not to show. She closed the door behind her. You know, she said. Phil told me this morning. I'm sorry. She said it without preamble, without softening it. Direct the way she was direct about everything. This is my fault. I should have... Stop, he said not unkindly. This isn't your fault. I brought this to your door, literally. Nathan Pierce brought it to my door. You had nothing to do with how he chose to handle what he found out. He met her eyes. You warned me Friday night. You told me he'd use whatever he found. That's the opposite of your fault. She stood very still. Keller called you. 2 o'clock. He called me too. 1 o'clock. She exhaled through her nose, the specific exhale of someone managing something internally. He's going to ask me directly if there's a personal relationship between us that represents a conflict of interest. What are you going to tell him? She looked at Daniel. The truth. What happened when it happened and why? Okay. Are you going to tell the truth? That's the only thing I know how to tell, he said. Something moved in her face. Not relief exactly, more like recognition, like she'd expected this, and still somehow been surprised to actually get it. "He has footage," she said. "Pierce, from a residential security camera on your block, a neighbor's. It shows me getting out of a car in front of your house and you holding the door open." "I know." Without context, it looks like, "I know what it looks like." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Does it look like what it actually was?" "No," she said quietly. "So we tell Keller what it actually was. We tell it clearly. We tell it the same way separately, because the same story told separately is the only thing that can't be twisted." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're not scared." "I didn't say that." "You look like you're not scared. I look like someone who's done this before," he said. "Standing in a room and saying something true that not everyone in the room wants to hear. I've been doing that my whole career. It's just, this time it's about me." She nodded slowly, moved toward the door. Hand on the frame. The same posture as the first time she'd been in this office 6 weeks ago, and the same quality of stillness. "Daniel," she said. "Yeah." He's not going to stop at Keller. He understood what she meant. This was the opening move, not the whole game. "I know," he said. "He's going to go to my father." "I know that too." She held his gaze. "My father he's a good man, but he's protective. And he has a particular way of seeing threats, and when he decides something is a threat..." She stopped. "He doesn't ask a lot of questions before he acts." "I'll handle it," Daniel said. "I don't want you to have to handle it alone." Something quiet and significant moved through the space between them. Not a moment with drama attached to it. Just the plain true fact of someone saying, "I don't want you alone in this," and the plain true fact of what that meant. "I'm not," he said. "Am I?" She looked at him. "No," she said. "You're not." She left. He sat at his desk and looked at the Harbor District folder and thought about two things simultaneously: load-bearing calculations, and the way Claire Whitmore said, "No," like it was a door she was walking through, not closing. At 1 o'clock, Claire was in Gerald Keller's office. Daniel couldn't know exactly what was said in that room. But he found out later, days later, when Claire told him, and he learned it in pieces, the way he learned most important things. Keller had asked her directly, professionally, without visible judgment, whether she had a prior relationship with Daniel Brooks that constituted a conflict of interest at the company level. Claire had told him everything. She told him about the night, about the restaurant steps, about losing her phone, not knowing her address, being in a condition that made her vulnerable and that she was not proud of. She told him Daniel had found her sitting alone in the rain and had given her a choice: leave or be helped, and had helped her without asking for anything in return. She told him about the separate sleeping arrangements, the glass of water on the nightstand, Emma's orange construction paper card. She told him that she had known who Daniel was when she gave him her last name on his porch steps because she had seen him at a company event 14 months earlier and had remembered him. Not his title. Him. She told Keller that what existed between her and Daniel now was a professional relationship with the beginning of something personal that had not been acted upon, and that she was being honest about that because anything less than honesty would be a disservice to everyone in the room. Then she told Keller that Nathan Pierce had been at the engagement party that night, that he had orchestrated the timing of the announcement specifically to cause pain, and that his arrival at Westbridge 6 weeks later was not coincidental, and that the footage he had apparently obtained and shared over a private dinner with 3 senior partners was the action of a man who understood leverage better than he understood ethics. Keller had listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "Thank you, Ms. Whitmore. I'll speak with Mr. Brooks at 2. "He'll tell you the same thing I told you," she said. "Exactly the same. Not because we coordinated it, because it's true." Keller had looked at her for a moment. "I believe you," he said. That was the 1 o'clock meeting. At 2 o'clock, Daniel sat across from Gerald Keller in an office that had been occupied for 22 years and showed it in the specific way long-occupied spaces show things, not cluttered but layered. A man's whole career sedimented into the shelves. Keller asked him the same question he'd asked Claire. Whether the relationship with Claire Whitmore constituted a conflict of interest. Daniel told him the same story Claire had told, word for word in the parts that were facts in the same sequence, because the facts were the facts, and facts don't change based on who's telling them. When he finished, Keller was quiet for a moment. Nathan Pierce, Keller said, came to dinner Friday with 3 of us and presented this situation as evidence of a potential ethical violation at the company level. I understand that's what he did, Daniel said. He had footage. Footage of me opening my front door for a woman who needed a safe place to sleep, Daniel said. I understand how that can be framed. He framed it as an employee using a vulnerable moment involving the owner's daughter to establish a personal relationship that creates a conflict within the company. Daniel looked at Keller directly. That's not what happened. I know, Keller said. Daniel waited. I've been at this company 22 years, Keller said. I know what a man looks like when he's running a calculation, and I know what a man looks like when he's telling the truth. You look like the second. He folded his hands on the desk. But the fact of the matter is that the situation exists. It's now known to at least 4 senior people, and Robert Whitmore does not yet know about it. When will he? Keller's expression told him the answer before the words did. This afternoon. Daniel nodded once. What happens in the meantime? Nothing is changing right now. You remain on the Harbor District project. You remain in your role. This is not a disciplinary situation, Mr. Brooks. But I want you to be prepared for a conversation with Mr. Whitmore. I'm prepared. He's going to hear Pierce's version first. Pierce requested a meeting with him this morning. It's at 4. Daniel looked at his watch. It was 2:17. He had less than 2 hours. Is there anything I can do? Daniel said, between now and 4 o'clock. Keller studied him. Do your job, he said. Do it well, the way you always do. Let the record speak. Daniel stood, extended his hand. Keller shook it. One more thing, Keller said. The Meridian Square project. The one the city approached us on 4 years ago. You were on the assessment team. Daniel paused. Yes. I was the one who took your flag to Whitmore. Keller said quietly. I never told him whose flag it was. He never asked, but I knew. He paused. I've been watching your work for 4 years, Mr. Brooks. I want you to know that. Daniel stood very still. Thank you, he said. He left. He went back to his desk. He opened the Harbor District folder. He worked for 93 minutes with the particular focused efficiency of someone who understands that the best argument they can make is the quality of what they produce. At 4 o'clock, Nathan Pierce walked into Robert Whitmore's office. Daniel didn't see it happen. He found out the shape of it later from Claire, who found out the shape of it from her father, who told her because he was, when all was said and done, a man who believed in telling his daughter difficult things directly, even when it cost him. Pierce sat across from Robert Whitmore and laid it out carefully. The footage, the timeline, the fact that an employee had taken Claire home in a vulnerable state. The word predatory appeared once placed with surgical precision. Robert Whitmore had listened to all of it. Then he said, Who told you about the footage? Pierce had paused. I made it my business to know. How? Another pause. I have contacts. Seattle is a connected city. You hired someone to watch my daughter, Robert said. His voice was level. The specific level of someone who has learned that the most frightening thing a powerful man can do is become very, very quiet. I was concerned. You obtained footage of my daughter without her knowledge and shared it at a private dinner with my senior partners before bringing it to me. Robert Whitmore looked at Nathan Pierce. That's what happened. Pierce recalibrated. I was trying to protect the company's interest. The company's interest. A pause. What do you know about Daniel Brooks? Pierce had come prepared for this question. He said, reliable employee, mid-level management, competent, but not exceptional, no particular distinction. The summary of a man Nathan Pierce had looked up for the purpose of diminishing. Robert Whitmore had listened to the summary. Then he said, 4 years ago, a member of my assessment team flagged environmental liability on a site the city wanted me to build on. That flag cost us $32 million in potential contract value. I was furious at the time. I thought it was overly cautious, and I wanted to override it. A pause. I didn't. 2 years later, the contractor who took the job was in litigation, and the project was frozen. Nobody got hurt, but the developer lost more than what that contract was worth. Another pause. I've spent 4 years wanting to know who flagged it. I found out 20 minutes ago. It was Daniel Brooks. Pierce said nothing. He didn't tell me, Robert said. He wasn't lobbying for credit. He just flagged contaminated ground because that was his job and it was the right thing to do. Whitmore looked at Pierce. That is a man I know something about. Now tell me again what you're saying he did. The meeting ended shortly after. Daniel didn't know any of this at 4 o'clock. He was at his desk, finishing the last section of the Harbor District Foundation report when his phone rang. Internal extension, executive floor. Daniel Brooks, he answered. Mr. Brooks, this is Robert Whitmore's assistant. He'd like to see you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Daniel's hand was steady on the phone. I'll be there, he said. He hung up. He sat at his desk for a moment. The office was quieting down around him, the end-of-day sounds, people gathering their things and logging off. His phone buzzed. Text, not a call. Claire. It said, My father knows everything. He's... A pause in the typing visible. Then I don't know what he's going to do. I'm sorry. He typed back, Don't be. 8 a.m. I'll tell him what I told Keller. The truth directly. That's what I've got. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, that's enough. It should be enough. He drove home in the particular kind of silence that isn't empty, the kind that's full of things you're not saying out loud because you're waiting to see how they land first. He picked up Emma from Mrs. Parrish's. Emma had finished her drawing of the knight's shield and showed it to him in the doorway, with both hands holding it up like evidence. It was a shield with a jagged crack down the middle, and around the crack she'd drawn small lines, reinforcements, he realized, like rebar, like something that had been broken and been made stronger at the break. That's exactly right, he said. She grinned, gap-toothed, and went inside. He made dinner. He helped Emma with her reading worksheet. He read her a chapter of the book they'd been going through together, a story about a boy and a dog and a cross-country journey that Emma had opinions about at every page. He tucked her in. He turned off the light. He stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at his daughter sleeping. Then he went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and thought about tomorrow. 8 o'clock. Robert Whitmore, the most powerful man in the room. Daniel had been in rooms with powerful men before. He'd been in rooms where the power was loud, where it filled every corner and made the air feel pressurized. He'd been in rooms where the power was quiet, which was harder because quiet power doesn't telegraph what it's going to do. Robert Whitmore's power was quiet, but Daniel had spent his whole career in rooms where the ground might not hold. He'd learned to test it before he put his weight on it, and he'd learned that the only thing you could count on was your own honesty about what you found. He'd built his whole career on the willingness to say, this ground isn't safe, when nobody in the room wanted to hear it. Tomorrow, he was going to walk into Robert Whitmore's office and say it again. This is what happened. This is what I did. This is why. This is who I am. He folded his hands on the table and looked at the kitchen around him. Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, the sticky note grocery list, the mug that said world's okayest dad, the spot on the nightstand in the spare room, visible through the hallway where he had left a glass of water for a stranger 6 weeks ago and started something he didn't yet have a name for. His phone buzzed one more time. Claire again. It said. She still has the card, the orange one. She put it on her wall, apparently. Mrs. Parrish told me. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I just thought you should know. He read it twice. Then he typed, Get some sleep. She typed back, You too. He put the phone down and looked at the kitchen for a while longer. Then he turned off the light. He was going to need everything he had tomorrow morning, and everything he had was exactly enough. It had always been exactly enough. Not more than that, not less. Just enough when it counted to hold. The kitchen went dark. Outside Seattle did what Seattle does at night. In November, it kept raining quietly without drama, the way things happen in real life that matter the most. And somewhere across the city, in a building that had his name on it, Robert Whitmore sat at his desk and looked at a security camera, still a woman stepping out of a car, a man holding a door open in the rain, and thought about a flag on a contaminated site and $32 million, and what it costs a man to hold a position when everything in the room is pushing him to let go. And Nathan Pierce sat in his hotel room and looked at his phone and recalculated. He was not finished. He had one move left, and he was going to use it. Daniel woke at 5:47 the next morning, 13 minutes before his alarm. He lay in the dark for a moment, completely still, the way he'd trained himself to wake up in the years after Lauren died, not reaching for her side of the bed anymore. Not that first disoriented second of forgetting. Just present, just here, just in the body he had and the day that was coming. 8 o'clock. Robert Whitmore. He got up, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window while it brewed and watched the street outside go from dark to gray to the particular pale blue of a Seattle morning that hasn't decided yet whether it's going to be kind to you. Emma came down at 6:50 with her hair unbrushed and her backpack already on, which meant she'd remembered today was library day, without being told, which happened maybe twice a year and was always a small miracle. "You're up early," she said, pulling out a chair. "Couldn't sleep past 6. She looked at him with the specific assessing quality she'd had since she was about 4 years old, the look that meant she was reading something. "Are you nervous about something?" "Little bit," he said honestly. Emma considered this while pouring cereal. "Is it the night stuff with the foundation?" He looked at her. She'd been listening to more of his work conversations than he'd realized. Or maybe she'd just been paying attention in the particular way children do, absorbing the texture of a thing, even when they don't have the vocabulary for the specifics. "Something like that," he said. "The shield has rebar," she told him firmly, like this settled it. "You're okay." He drove her to school. He watched her go through the double doors. She turned once at the top of the steps and waved without looking back, the wave of someone who knows you're watching and wants you to know they know. He drove to Westbridge. He was at his desk by 7:20. He reviewed the Harbor District report one more time, not because it needed review, but because the act of doing the work grounded him the same way the act of deciding what to have for coffee had grounded him in the worst months after Lauren. Small, real concrete things. The weight of facts in your hands. At 7:58, he took the elevator to the executive floor. The assistant showed him in at exactly 8 o'clock. Robert Whitmore was standing at the window when Daniel entered, not sitting behind the desk, standing, looking out at the city with his hands in his pockets, and he turned when he heard Daniel come in, and Daniel got his first real close look at the man. He'd seen Robert Whitmore at company events, at the all-hands meetings twice a year, where Whitmore stood at the front of a room of 400 employees and made it look effortless. From those distances, Whitmore was a type, the kind of man who had built something real from something smaller and carried the weight of that in his posture. Up close, he was different. Older than he looked from across a room. There were things in his face that didn't show up at a distance, the specific kind of tiredness that comes not from lack of sleep, but from years of carrying decisions that had consequences for people other than yourself. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Mr. Brooks." Daniel sat. Whitmore sat across from him, not behind the desk, but in the chair beside it, which shifted something about the geometry of the room and was almost certainly a deliberate choice. "I'm going to tell you what I know," Whitmore said, "and then I'm going to ask you to tell me what's true. Can you do that?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Nathan Pierce came to me yesterday and told me that you had a personal relationship with my daughter that predates her joining this company. that you used a situation involving her vulnerability to establish that relationship. He had footage of her arriving at your home." Whitmore's voice was level, not angry, something more controlled than angry. He implied that your proximity to Claire and to the Harbor District project represents a conflict of interest that the company should address. Daniel waited to make sure Whitmore was finished. "That's what he told you," Daniel said. "Yes." "Can I tell you what actually happened? That's why you're here." So Daniel told him, the same way he'd told Keller, the same sequence, the same facts, the same specific details, the restaurant steps, the rain, no phone, no address, the choice he made and why he made it, the bedroom, the couch, the glass of water, the Tylenol on the nightstand, Emma's orange card in the morning, the car service, the name Whitmore on his front porch meaning nothing to him yet because the connection hadn't completed. He told it without apology and without performance. Just the facts in order, at a pace that allowed them to be heard. When he finished, Whitmore was quiet. "You didn't know who she was," he said. "Not until Monday morning." "And when you found out?" "I went to my desk and I did my job," Daniel said. "Because that was the right thing to do, and the only thing I knew how to do." Whitmore looked at him. Really looked at him, the way experienced men look at other men when they're trying to read something beneath the surface. "Why didn't you tell someone?" he said. "When you found out, why didn't you go to HR, disclose it, proactively cover yourself?" "Because there was nothing to disclose," Daniel said. "I helped a person who needed help. I didn't know who she was. When I found out who she was, nothing about what I'd done changed. There was no conflict of interest because there was no relationship. There was one night where I did what I hope any decent person would have done." Another long pause. "Gerald Keller tells me you're the man who flagged the Meridian Square site," Whitmore said. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me that was you?" "Because it wasn't relevant," Daniel said. "I did my job. I wrote a flag. Someone senior took it forward. That's how the process is supposed to work." Whitmore made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but was in the same neighborhood, like something had confirmed itself. "My daughter," he said. He stopped. Something moved in his face that he didn't immediately control. "She called me last night, after Pierce left. She told me everything, her version." He paused. "She told me you made her eggs. She needed breakfast," Daniel said. Whitmore looked at the window for a moment. When he turned back, something in his face had shifted just slightly, just enough. "My daughter has been surrounded her whole life by people who wanted something from her," he said. "From her name, from what her last name opens. I built this company with the intention of giving her something, and somewhere along the way He stopped. "I didn't realize I'd also built a cage around her." He said it the way people say things they've recently understood and are still getting used to. "She came back from London different, stronger. And I took credit for that in my own head, told myself she'd gone to grow and come back ready. But that strength had nothing to do with me. She built that herself alone in a city where nobody knew her name." Daniel said nothing. This was not his territory to speak into. "She told me about Nathan," Whitmore said. "The engagement party, what he did." His jaw was set. "I didn't know. I knew they'd ended the engagement. I didn't know the circumstances." A pause that had weight. "I introduced them. I thought he was the right kind of man. I was looking at the wrong things." "People look at what they're taught to look at," Daniel said quietly. Whitmore met his eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means the things that matter, the things that actually tell you who someone is, those are slow. They happen in small moments, when nobody's watching, when there's no upside to doing the right thing. Those are hard to see from a distance." He paused. "You built a company that signs my paychecks and employs 400 people. That's a lot of years of a lot of decisions. I'd imagine most of the ones that mattered most happened when no one was looking." The room was very quiet. Whitmore sat back in his chair. "Nathan Pierce is not going to be part of the Harbor District project," he said. "That decision was made last night." Daniel absorbed that. The situation with Claire, Whitmore said. He said her name with a specific texture, Claire, not my daughter, like he was trying to see her as a separate person and practicing the shift in real time. Whatever exists between you, I'm not going to tell her what to do with it. She's 30 years old. She's already stopped listening to that anyway. Something that was almost a smile moved across his face, brief and real. But I'm telling you, man to man, that I'll be watching. Not because I think you're a threat, because she matters to me and I owe it to her to pay better attention. That's fair, Daniel said. If you hurt her, I won't, Daniel said. Not I'll try not to. Not I don't plan to. Just the plain fact of it. Whitmore studied him. She said your daughter made her a card, he said. Emma makes cards for everyone. It's her default response to most situations. What did it say? Good morning, Claire. Come back sometime. Daniel paused. She didn't know Claire's last name. She didn't know anything. She just knew her dad had helped someone who needed help, and she wanted to be part of that. Something happened in Robert Whitmore's face that he turned toward the window to manage. When he turned back, he was composed, mostly. You're still on the Harbor District project, he said. Nothing changes on your end. Daniel stood, extended his hand. Whitmore stood and shook it. Mr. Whitmore, Daniel said. For what it's worth, what you said about the cage, about not realizing. That's the kind of thing that's hard to say. He held the man's gaze. She knows you love her. That's not the question. The question's just how. And I think you're asking it. Whitmore said nothing. Daniel left. He was in the elevator going down when his legs did the thing legs do. After the adrenaline breaks, a slight softening, a physical acknowledgement that the thing you'd been braced for is over, and the body is releasing what it had been holding. He pressed the lobby button and breathed. The elevator descended. He thought, okay, that's done. He didn't know yet that it wasn't. Nathan Pierce made his last move at 11 o'clock that same morning, not through the company, not through Keller or the senior partners or a dinner conversation. He went directly to the source, the one pressure point he knew would bypass every professional layer and land somewhere personal. He called Claire. She was in a working session with the Harbor District Advisory Team when her phone buzzed. She didn't recognize the number he'd called from a different line the way careful people do when they're not sure they'll be answered. But she recognized the exchange. Her thumb hesitated over the screen. She excused herself from the meeting. She took the call in the hallway. Claire. His voice was the same as it always was. Smooth, even. The voice of someone who had never had to adjust his register because rooms adjusted themselves around him. I think we should talk. We have nothing to talk about, Nathan. I think we do. I think there are some things you should understand about Daniel Brooks before this goes further. I know everything I need to know about Daniel Brooks. You know what he's shown you. A pause precise and placed. You don't know what I found. She kept her voice level. What you found. You mean the footage you obtained by surveilling my movements and then weaponized in a private dinner with my father's senior partners. A brief silence. He hadn't expected the word surveilling. He'd expected got or shared or something softer. The precision of the word landed, and he had to recalibrate. I was trying to protect... Stop. Her voice was quiet. Nathan, listen to me carefully. You don't have anything. You have footage of a man helping a person who needed help. You have a story that falls apart when the true version is told by two people separately with identical details. You have... She stopped. You have yourself. That's what you have. And that's the problem, isn't it? That's been the problem since the beginning. Claire, you called this number to tell me something damaging about Daniel because you're threatened by a man who doesn't operate the way you operate, who doesn't think about everything in terms of position and leverage and what it costs. Her voice remained steady, but there was something beneath the steadiness now. Not anger exactly, more like a door she had decided to walk through rather than close. He made me eggs, Nathan. He gave me his bedroom and slept on the couch and left medicine on the nightstand, and never once made me feel like I owed him anything. And his 7-year-old daughter made me a card out of orange construction paper because someone needed help, and that was reason enough. She paused. That's what you're threatened by. Not his position. Not his access. His character. Nathan Pierce said nothing. Don't call me again, Claire said. Not this number. Not any number. We're done professionally. My father made that decision, and I support it. We are done in every other sense too, and that decision I made 2 years ago myself, in case you're still confused about the sequence. A breath. Goodbye, Nathan. She ended the call. She stood in the hallway for a moment. Then she went back into the meeting. She told Daniel about the call that afternoon in the parking structure again. The same ramp where they'd stood 6 weeks ago, and he'd talked about small decisions and the way static clears. She told it factually, without drama, the way she told most things. But he heard what was underneath it, and what was underneath it was a woman who had just closed something she'd been carrying for 2 years. Are you okay? He said. I'm better than okay, she said. She looked for the word. Clarified. He looked at her. He called to do damage, she said. And what happened instead was that I heard myself say true things out loud. To him. The person who probably deserved it the least, and somehow needed to hear it the most. She exhaled. You said something in the archive room, about making small decisions on purpose. One thing then the next thing. That's what it felt like. I just kept saying the next true thing. Yeah, he said quietly. That's how it works. She looked at him for a moment. Full clear. The way she'd looked at him on his front porch the morning after before she got in the car, like something had been confirmed, and she was still getting used to the confirmation. Emma's card is on my wall, she said. At my apartment. I hung it with the picture from the company's last summer event. The one where my father's looking at the camera, and I'm looking at something off to the left. What were you looking at? He said. She held his gaze. You were standing in the back of the frame, talking to one of the crew chiefs. You were listening to something he was saying, and you were completely present, not waiting for your turn to talk, not looking for someone more important to talk to. Just listening. She paused. I noticed it. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but I noticed it. Daniel processed that. The timeline shifted in his head. He'd thought it had started on the restaurant steps, but she was telling him it had started before that, 14 months before. At a company event, where he'd been standing in the back of a room talking to a crew chief, and she had been across that room paying attention. Why didn't you? He stopped. What? She said. Why didn't you say anything that night at the party on the steps, when you gave me your name? Because I needed to know if it was real, she said simply. If I'd told you that night that I knew who you were, it would have changed everything. You'd have been thinking about what it meant. I needed to see who you were when you thought I was just a stranger. He stood very still. And, he said, and you gave me your bedroom, she said, and you slept on the couch, and you made eggs. She looked down at her keys for a moment, then back up. And Emma made me a card. The parking structure was quiet around them. Claire, he said. Yeah. He didn't have a prepared sentence for this. He hadn't prepared anything. He was operating on the same principle he'd been operating on for 5 years, one true thing, then the next true thing. I don't know how to do this with low stakes, he said. I never have. I think it's just either something matters or it doesn't, and this matters, and I'm not good at pretending it doesn't. I don't want you to pretend, she said. Then I won't. He held her gaze. But I need you to know that Emma is the center of everything for me. Not a complication, the center, if this is going to be something that's part of what it is. I know, she said. She's 7. She makes cards for strangers. She drew a shield with a crack in it and called it stronger for the crack. He paused. She's the best thing I've ever done, and I need to protect her from things that might... Daniel, Claire's voice was quiet. I know what I'm saying yes to. He looked at her. You're saying yes, he said. I'm saying yes, she confirmed. Not a dramatic sentence, Not delivered with music or weight. Just two people in a parking structure on a Tuesday in November saying the true thing, the next true thing, the one that came after all the others. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. She almost smiled. Just okay. Okay is plenty, he said. Okay means we start. And that was the moment. Not the rain, not the conference room, not the archive or the hallways, or the parking structure conversations about London and contaminated soil and things that cost something. This moment. Okay means we start. It was 4:30 on a Tuesday, and Seattle was doing its November thing outside, and they stood there for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. And then Claire said, "I'll see you tomorrow," and walked up the ramp, and Daniel walked down, and they went to their separate cars and drove in separate directions, and both of them knew that from this moment forward, separate was a temporary condition. He picked up Emma from Mrs. Parrish's at 5:15. Emma took one look at his face. "Something good happened," she said. "How do you know?" "You look the same, but different." She cocked her head. "Like when you fixed the step on the porch and you didn't say anything but you were happy about it for 3 days. He looked at his daughter. "Something good happened," he confirmed. She accepted this with a satisfied nod and went to get her backpack. He stood in Mrs. Parrish's doorway and thought about what it felt like to have something good happen and to have a person who could see it on your face without you saying a word. He thought about how long it had been since he'd had that. Not just with Emma, but with anyone. He thought about Claire standing in his kitchen that morning 6 weeks ago, both hands around a glass of orange juice, looking at his refrigerator like she was trying to understand a language she'd been hearing her whole life but had never been taught. He thought about what it cost to hold a line and what it felt like when the thing you were holding the line for finally arrived. He drove Emma home. He made dinner. He listened to her describe in extraordinary detail the plot of the book she'd finished at school that day, which involved a horse, a hurricane, and a girl who discovered she was braver than she thought. Emma had opinions about each of these elements separately, and also in combination. He washed dishes. He thought about tomorrow. It was 8:15 when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Robert Whitmore. He set down the dish towel. "Mr. Whitmore," he answered. "Daniel." The use of his first name registered they'd been Mr. Whitmore and Mr. Brooks all morning. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all." A pause. The particular pause of a man who doesn't often make this kind of call and is finding his way through it. "I spoke with Claire this afternoon." "Okay." "She told me about Pierce's call. What she said to him." Another pause. "She also told me about the parking structure conversation." Daniel waited. "I'm not calling to weigh in on that," Whitmore said. "I said what I said this morning, and I meant it. She's 30 years old, and I'm done making decisions for her." A breath. "I'm calling because she said something that—" He stopped. "She said you told her that Emma is the center, not a complication. The center." He paused. "I should have said that about Claire 30 years ago. I built things for her instead of with her. There's a difference I didn't understand until too late." Daniel said nothing. This was still not his territory. "I'm telling you this," Whitmore said, "because you're apparently the kind of man who understands things like that. And I want you to know I'm trying to—" Another stop. "I'm trying to understand the difference now." "That's enough," Daniel said. "Starting to understand is enough." A pause. "Your daughter," Whitmore said. "Emma, how old did you say?" 7. "What's she like?" Daniel looked at the ceiling where Emma's room was directly above him. He could hear her moving around up there, the specific weight of a 7-year-old's footstep, which is somehow both light and completely unmistakable. "She makes cards for strangers," he said. "She drew a shield with a crack in it and said the crack made it stronger. She just finished a book about a girl who finds out she's braver than she thought, and she spent 45 minutes at dinner telling me everything that was wrong with the ending." Whitmore made the sound again, the one that wasn't quite a laugh. "What was wrong with the ending?" he asked. "The girl goes back to the town she started from," Daniel said. Emma thinks that's too easy. She thinks the braver thing would have been to stay somewhere new. A silence. She sounds like Claire, Whitmore said very quietly. At 7. Daniel heard that, let it sit. Maybe they'll get along then, he said, simply, without weight. Another silence, and in that silence, he could hear Whitmore deciding something. Yes, Whitmore said finally. Maybe they will. They said goodnight and hung up. Daniel stood in his kitchen for a moment, phone in his hand. Then he went upstairs, knocked on Emma's door, and sat on the edge of her bed while she told him the rest of what was wrong with the book's ending, in comprehensive and convincing detail. He listened to every word. At 9:30, he turned off her light and sat in the hallway for a moment outside her door in the dark thinking. He thought about the week that had just happened. Nathan Pierce and security footage, and Gerald Keller and Robert Whitmore's office, and the moment in the parking structure where OK became the beginning of something. He thought about how much of it had been outside his control, and how little that had mattered because the only thing inside his control had been what it was always inside his control. What he said, what he did, who he was when no one was watching, and who he was when everyone was watching. He'd been the same person both times. That was the whole thing. That was the whole strategy, the entire foundation, the one thing he'd built everything else on. Just be the same. Be the same person when it costs you something as when it doesn't. Be the same person in the rain at 2 in the morning as you are in the boss's office at 8 a.m. Be the same person in the archive room and the parking structure and the kitchen at 11 o'clock at night with a dish towel in your hand. Just be the same. Everything else would either hold or it wouldn't, and there was nothing you could do about the part that was outside your hands. He went downstairs. He looked at the spare room. He thought about a glass of water and 2 Tylenol on a nightstand, placed there for a stranger in the dark. He thought about the beginning of things. He turned off the kitchen light. Outside, for the first time in 3 weeks, it had stopped raining. The street was wet and quiet, and the street lights made it look like something had been washed clean, which was, Daniel thought, as good an image as any for where things stood. Not finished. Not resolved into something neat and final. Just clean. Just clear. Just the next day waiting on the other side of the night, with everything still in front of it. Nathan Pierce checked out of his hotel that night. He did not leave a forwarding contact. He did not contact Westbridge again. He flew back to New York on the 7:45 and told himself the Seattle deal had never made financial sense anyway. He told himself this in the specific way people tell themselves things they need to believe in order to keep moving forward, and by the time the plane crossed into Oregon airspace, he had almost convinced himself it was true. Almost. He thought about Claire's voice on the phone. The specific word she'd used, surveilling. Not watching. Not found. Surveilling. Like she'd seen what it was from the outside and named it precisely and handed it back to him to hold. He thought about what she'd said. About eggs. About a card made of orange construction paper. He looked out the plane window at Oregon passing below, dark and wet and enormous. He didn't understand it. He never would. Some things you can't understand from the position Nathan Pierce had always occupied, looking at the world as a board, reading people as pieces, calculating outcomes as profits and losses. From that position, a man who slept on his own couch so a stranger could have his bedroom made no sense. The calculation didn't work. There was no return on investment. Nathan Pierce would spend a long time after this not understanding it. That was perhaps the most fitting cost. And in Seattle, Daniel Brooks went to sleep in a house that still had Lauren's handwriting on a card in the kitchen junk drawer, and Emma slept upstairs with her flashlight and her books. And somewhere across the city, Claire Whitmore lay in her apartment, with an orange construction paper card on her wall, and thought about the next true thing. Just the next one. Then the one after that. That was enough. That had always been enough. The first Saturday, Claire came to the house she didn't call ahead. Daniel was in the backyard with Emma helping her build something that had started as a birdhouse and evolved through several executive decisions made entirely by Emma into what she was now calling a bird apartment complex. There was a blueprint. Emma had drawn it herself on graph paper with labeled sections and a parking area for birds that Daniel had gently suggested might be unnecessary, and Emma had firmly overruled. He heard the knock at the front door and went around the side of the house to find Claire standing on the porch with both hands in her coat pockets and a look on her face that was somewhere between deliberate calm and barely managed uncertainty. She was not carrying anything. No folder, no tablet, no professional prop of any kind. Just herself in a coat on a Saturday morning. "I should have called," she said. "You should have," he agreed. "Come in." She followed him through the front door. He watched her take in the living room, not the way she'd looked at it the first time that early morning examination of a place she was trying to orient herself inside. This time, she looked at it the way you look at somewhere you've been thinking about, like she was checking it against a version she'd been carrying. "Emma's in the back," he said. "We're building something." "What are you building?" "A bird apartment complex." Claire looked at him. "It has a parking area," he said, "for birds." Something broke in her face. The carefully managed uncertainty dissolved in one fast, genuine laugh, and it was the same laugh he'd heard in the archive room 6 weeks ago. The real one. "Can I see?" she said. "You'll have to ask the architect." He took her through the kitchen and out the back door. Emma was crouched over the blueprint with a pencil, making a modification that appeared to involve a rooftop deck. She looked up when she heard them come out. She looked at Claire. She stood up. "You came back," Emma said. Claire crouched down to Emma's level. "I got your card," she said. "The one that said come back sometime." Emma studied her with the thorough, unself-conscious assessment of a 7-year-old taking inventory of a new person. "I made another one," she said, "but I didn't know when to give it to you." "You can give it to me now," Claire said. Emma looked at Daniel. He shrugged. She dropped the pencil and went inside at a run. They heard her footsteps on the stairs, the sound of a drawer, footsteps back down, and she came through the back door, holding a piece of yellow construction paper. She handed it to Claire with both hands. Claire took it with both hands. It said in Emma's careful large letters, "Welcome back, Claire." There was a drawing of what was clearly the house. Emma had gotten more specific this time, including the front porch steps, and something that might have been a bird apartment on the roof. Claire looked at the card for a long moment. "Thank you, Emma," she said. Her voice was level, but only barely. "You can stay for lunch if you want," Emma said. "We have the stuff for grilled cheese." "Grilled cheese sounds perfect," Claire said. Emma nodded, satisfied, and picked up her pencil. "You can help with the blueprint," she said. "But I'm the architect. You can be the assistant architect." "I'll take it," Claire said. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching his daughter explain load-bearing wall concepts, which she had absorbed from approximately 3 years of listening to her father talk about work to Claire Whitmore, who had spent 2 years consulting on development projects across Europe, and who was listening with complete and genuine attention, asking questions, not managing the conversation, but actually in it. He went inside and made grilled cheese. He made 3 sandwiches. He cut Emma's diagonally because she had strong feelings about diagonal. He put the plates on the kitchen table and went to the back door and said, "Lunch," and Emma came in immediately because grilled cheese ranked extremely high in her personal hierarchy of priorities. Claire came in after her and washed her hands at the kitchen sink and sat down at the table in the chair Emma pointed to, which was the chair that Daniel usually sat in, but Emma had her own seating logic and it was not worth questioning. They ate lunch. Emma talked about the bird apartment complex. She talked about a book she was reading. She talked about a girl at school named Priya, who was her best friend, and who had a dog named Senator, and she explained the name Senator to Claire in full, which involved a story about Priya's grandfather that took several minutes and had a surprising ending. Claire listened to all of it. She asked follow-up questions. She remembered details from one sentence and connected them to another, the way people do when they're actually paying attention, and not just waiting for their turn. Daniel watched it happen across the lunch table and felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't realized had been unsettled. Not the professional situation, not the Nathan Pierce chapter, those had settled already. Something older than that. Something he hadn't known he was still waiting for. The evidence of it was simple and small. His daughter was eating a grilled cheese sandwich and talking about a dog named Senator. And the woman sitting across from her was completely present, completely in the conversation, not performing interest, but actually interested. That was the whole thing. That was all it was. That was everything. After lunch, Emma went upstairs to get something she wanted to show Claire, a drawing series she'd been working on about the night with the earthquake-resistant foundations, which had apparently developed into an ongoing project with multiple chapters. Daniel started washing the plates. Claire stood up and brought her plate to the sink. She stood beside him. "She's remarkable," Claire said quietly. "I know. She's so completely herself, at 7. She's always been like that, from basically the beginning." He rinsed a plate. "Lauren was like that. Lauren never second-guessed who she was. I think Emma got it directly." A small pause. "You talk about her naturally," Claire said. "Lauren, you don't make it heavy." "It's not heavy anymore," he said. "It was for a long time, but now it's just true. She was here. She was real. Emma is partly her. That's not sad. That's just how it is." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then, "I want to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly." "I always answer honestly. That's one of my more inconvenient qualities." She almost smiled. "The night I was on those steps, at the restaurant, if I'd just been someone you didn't know, not someone who ended up being connected to your job or your company or anything, if it had just been a stranger, would you still have stopped?" He turned off the water, turned to look at her. "Yes," he said, without pause. "Why?" "Because you were sitting in the rain without a coat," he said. "And you had a look on your face that I recognized." "What look?" He thought about how to say it accurately. "The look of someone who's stopped expecting to be helped," he said. "Who's already decided they're not worth the trouble." He paused. "I know that look because I wore it for about 3 months after Lauren died. And the people who stopped and helped me anyway, those are the people I think about when I decide who I want to be." Claire looked at him for a long time. "I wasn't sure I was worth the trouble," she said quietly. "That night, I really wasn't." "I know," he said, "but you stopped anyway." "But I stopped anyway." She held his gaze. Something in her face was very still and very clear, and very much what it was without anything built over it. "Okay," she said. The same word he'd used in the parking structure. But it meant something different here, not a beginning, but a landing. A place she'd arrived at after a long journey and was setting down her bags. From upstairs, Emma's voice. "Claire, I need to show you something." Claire's expression shifted immediately, that clean, fast warmth that Emma produced in every adult she'd decided to include. "Coming?" Claire called up the stairs. She looked at Daniel one more second. Then she went. He stood at the kitchen sink and listened to Emma's voice above him, narrating the night series with full dramatic commitment, and Claire's voice responding, asking questions, reacting to plot developments, treating the artwork with the same seriousness she brought to Harbor District reports. He dried the plates. He thought, this is it. This is the whole thing. This moment, this house, these sounds. He didn't need it to be larger than it was. It was already exactly the right size. 3 months passed. The Harbor District project reached a milestone that the company hadn't hit in 4 years. All 3 phases signed off by the city on the original timeline. No litigation exposure. No remediation surprises. Daniel's team had delivered the cleanest major project in Westbridge's recent history, and the result was not secret. People knew whose judgment had held the line when every pressure said to accelerate. In those 3 months, things changed in specific, quiet ways that don't make for dramatic announcements, but that accumulate into something real. Claire was at Daniel's house most Saturday lunches. This had started as a sometimes thing, and had become without either of them declaring it a consistent thing. Emma had promoted her from assistant architect to co-architect on the Bird apartment complex, which was now complete, and housed 2 separate bird families, which Emma was tracking with a notebook she called the tenant log. Robert Whitmore called Daniel twice in those months. Once about a project question that could have been handled by email but wasn't. Once with no professional pretext at all, just to say that Claire had mentioned Emma had a school performance coming up and he wanted to know how it had gone. They spoke for 11 minutes. It was the most human conversation Daniel had ever had with a man who signed his paychecks. Claire was in the front row of Emma's school winter performance. Daniel was 1 seat to her left. Robert Whitmore, who had not been told he was invited, but had been texted the address by Claire, with no explanation, arrived 4 minutes before it started, and sat 1 row behind them. He did not say much. He watched Emma, who was playing a snowflake in a costume that was primarily made of aluminum foil, with the focused attention of a man doing something he should have done differently a long time ago, and is committed to getting right now. At the end, Emma found them all in the lobby. She looked at Daniel, then Claire, then she stopped. She looked at Robert Whitmore. "Who are you?" she said. "I'm Claire's father," Whitmore said. Emma processed this. "You're the boss," she said. "I'm one of them." Emma looked at Claire. Claire's expression said yes. "This is real. Go ahead." "I made a card for you," Emma said to Whitmore, "but I didn't know you were coming." Whitmore looked at this 7-year-old in aluminum foil and said completely sincerely, "I'll wait for it." Emma nodded like this was a binding contract. "It'll be purple," she told him. "Purple is for important people." Something happened in Robert Whitmore's face that he didn't try to manage. Daniel watched it happen and filed it away in the place where he kept things that mattered. The twist, the one nobody saw coming, not even the people it happened to, arrived on a Thursday morning in February, when Daniel was called into Gerald Keller's office. He sat down across from Keller with the same evenness he'd brought to the same office 7 weeks ago, when the ground had been shaking under everything. The ground wasn't shaking now. Keller folded his hands. "Robert Whitmore wants to create a new position," he said. "Director of Project Integrity. It's a new title, a new role. Oversight on environmental compliance, construction ethics, site assessment standards across all divisions." He paused. "He'd like you to take it." Daniel sat very still. "The Meridian Square flag," Keller said. "The Harbor District. The way you handled the Pierce situation. The way you've handled everything actually over 5 years." He looked at Daniel directly. He said, and I'm quoting him, that he wants someone in that role who does the right thing when nobody's looking. He said you've been doing that since before he knew your name. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Does Claire know?" he said. Keller paused. "He wanted to tell you first, to make sure you didn't feel like it was connected to her," Daniel said. "Yes." Daniel looked at the desk between them. He thought about 4 years ago, a flag on contaminated ground, $32 million in contract value, and the choice to write the flag anyway. He thought about the Meridian Square site, sitting frozen in litigation right now. He thought about what it costs to hold a line and what it means when the thing you protected turns out to be bigger than you knew. "Tell him yes," Daniel said. Then he thought of something. "Tell him I need to think about it," he said, "for 24 hours. Keller raised an eyebrow. "I have someone I need to talk to first," Daniel said. He drove home. He picked up Emma from school at 3:15. He made her a snack. He sat at the kitchen table while she ate it, and he said, "I have something to tell you, and I need your opinion." Emma put down her apple. This was clearly important. She gave him her full attention. He explained the new job in terms she could understand: more responsibility, different work. A chance to make sure buildings were built safely and honestly. More pressure, more at stake. Emma listened to all of it. "Is it the night stuff?" she said. "Yeah," he said. "It's the night stuff." She thought about it for a full 30 seconds, which in 7-year-old time is a serious deliberation. "Take it," she said. "You sure? Your shield has rebar," she said. "You can handle it." He called Claire that night. She answered on the second ring. "My father told me," she said, before he could say anything. He asked me if I thought you'd take it, and I said I didn't know, and he said he didn't either, which is why he offered it to you, instead of someone he was certain about. What does that mean? It means he wanted someone who would consider it seriously, instead of just saying yes because it was an opportunity. A pause. He wants someone in that role who understands what it costs to say no to the wrong things. Daniel looked at the ceiling. I talked to Emma, he said. What did she say? Take it. Your shield has rebar. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then, she's 7. Best advisor I've got. A real laugh, the good one. Are you going to take it? Yes, he said. I already told Keller yes. But I wanted to talk to you first. Why me? Because you matter, he said, directly, the same way he said everything that was true. Because this changes things. My schedule, my scope, the pressure I'm carrying. That affects more than just me now. So I needed you to know before it was decided. The silence on the line was the kind that's full. Daniel, she said. Yeah, I've known men who never once consulted anyone before making a decision that affected the people around them, she said. My whole life, I've been in rooms with men like that. A pause. Thank you for not being that. Thank you for noticing, he said. It was the most honest exchange they'd had, and they'd had a lot of honest exchanges. Good night, she said. Good night. He hung up. He looked at the kitchen. The refrigerator with Emma's drawings held by alphabet magnets. The grocery list in his own handwriting. The mug that said, World's Okayest Dad that Emma had given him for his birthday 2 years ago, which she'd found at a craft fair and selected with total confidence. The spot on the spare room nightstand, visible through the hallway, where a glass of water had sat on a Friday night in November when the city was wet and a stranger needed somewhere safe. He'd done that one thing, and the one thing had opened into all of this, 6 months after the night it began. Daniel Brooks stood at the Harbor District opening ceremony in front of 400 people and felt the particular kind of stillness that comes when you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Not comfortable, it was cold, and the sound system kept cutting in and out, and he'd given Phil the wrong revision of the remarks which Phil had discovered 15 minutes before the event, resulting in a very fast reprint situation. Nothing about it was smooth, but it was real. It was built. It was standing on solid ground which he had tested personally. Robert Whitmore gave his remarks from the podium. He thanked the teams, the city, the investors. He talked about what the project represented, not just the buildings, but the standard they'd held themselves to, the way they'd chosen the longer timeline over the shortcut, the way integrity had been the operating principle rather than the afterthought. Then he paused. He looked out at the crowd. There's a man on our team, he said, who 4 years ago flagged a contaminated site at significant cost to his own position and asked for no recognition for it, who 6 months ago held a professional line under personal pressure and emerged with the same character he walked in with, who built the Harbor District project to a standard that this company will be proud of for a long time. He looked directly at Daniel. Daniel Brooks is the new Director of Project Integrity at Westbridge Construction. That title was created because of him, and what it means is exactly what the name says. The applause was real, and it was loud, and Daniel stood in it with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the ground for exactly 3 seconds before he looked up, because he was not a man who couldn't accept a moment when it came. He found Emma in the crowd immediately. She was standing with Marcus, who had brought her because Claire was at the podium with her father, and Emma was clapping with the total, uninhibited commitment of a child who has not yet learned to manage her enthusiasm. She caught his eye. She gave him a thumbs up with one hand and pointed at him with the other, her expression saying, "Told you. The shield with rebar." "I told you." He pointed back. Claire was beside her father at the podium, and she was not looking at Daniel when he found her. She was looking at Emma, watching Emma clap, with a look on her face that was so unguarded, so completely itself, that Daniel had to look away for a moment, because it was the kind of thing that felt private, even when it was happening in public. He looked back. Claire looked up at him across the crowd. She didn't smile. She didn't do anything with her face. She just looked at him the way you look at something that's true. He looked back the same way. That was the whole exchange. That was everything. That night, after the ceremony and the reception and the long process of getting Emma home and fed, and through her entire analysis of the event, which included strong opinions about the sound system, detailed observations about Robert Whitmore's tie, and a request to be told exactly what Daniel's new title meant, and whether it involved any nights after all of it, Daniel sat in the kitchen alone. He sat with a glass of water. He thought about Lauren. He thought about her the way he always thought about her now, not with the weight of what was gone, but with the particular warmth of what was true. She had loved this house. She had chosen it with him specific room by specific room, standing in empty spaces trying to feel what they would be full. She had been right about all of them. He thought about what she would think of where he had landed. He thought she would say about time. He thought she would mean it in the best possible way. His phone buzzed. Claire. It said, "Emma just texted me from your phone, didn't she?" He looked at the phone, looked toward the stairs, looked back at the phone. He typed, "I'm going to need to change my passcode." 3 dots. Then, "She texted me that you're a good night, and that the Bird apartment complex has a waiting list." He laughed. Alone in the kitchen, genuinely out loud. He typed, "She's not wrong on either count." A pause. Then Claire typed, "No, she's really not." Another pause. Then Daniel. He typed, "Yeah." She typed, "Thank you for the eggs." He sat with that for a moment. He typed, "Thank you for coming back." He put the phone down. He sat in the kitchen of the house where it had started in the quiet, that was not empty, but full, the quiet of a life that had things in it worth being quiet around. The spare room was through the hallway. The nightstand was there. The small lamp, the spot where the glass had been. The beginning of all of it, in one unremarkable piece of furniture in one ordinary room, in one modest house on a hill in Seattle. He had not changed a single thing in that room. He did not intend to. Some things you don't renovate. Some things you leave exactly as they are, because what happened in them was exactly right, and the room already knows it, and the knowing is enough. Daniel Brooks had spent 5 years building a life after the worst thing, building it the same way he built everything. One solid thing at a time, testing the ground before he put weight on it, holding the line when the line was worth holding. He had not built it for recognition. Not for a title or a promotion or a ceremony with 400 people and a sound system that cut in and out. He had built it because Emma deserved a father who showed her what it looked like to do things right. Because Lauren had deserved to be honored by the way he kept going after she was gone. Because doing the right thing when no one was watching was not a strategy and not a performance and not a calculation. It was just who he was, and who he was had turned out in the end to be exactly enough. More than enough. A 7-year-old who drew shields with rebar had told him so, and she was right, and she had always been right, and she would be right again tomorrow, and that was the whole story. That was all of it. That was enough.